One rainy afternoon, a woman walked into the courtroom holding a stack of folders so tightly that her knuckles had turned pale. She looked exhausted. Her coat was damp from the weather outside, and beside her stood a little girl no older than 7, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one missing eye. The child stayed close to her mother's side and kept glancing nervously around the room as people settled into their seats. The bailiff called the case. The landlord sat at the other table wearing a dark gray suit that looked far more expensive than anything the woman owned. He leaned back in his chair with the confidence of someone who believed the courtroom was only a small inconvenience in his day. He barely looked at the mother. Instead, he adjusted his watch and whispered something to the man sitting beside him. Judge Judy looked down at the paperwork in front of her. "So," she said calmly, "you're suing your landlord for illegal eviction, destruction of property, and emotional distress." The woman nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you are?" "Melissa Grant." Judge Judy looked toward the landlord. "And you are Mr. Daniel Porter?" "Yes, ma'am." Judge Judy adjusted her glasses. Miss Grant, start from the beginning." Slowly. Melissa took a breath that shook slightly before she spoke. "Dutch. I rented an apartment from Mr. Porter for almost 3 years. It was me and my daughter, Emily. I always paid rent on time. Maybe once or twice I was a few days late, but I always paid." Judge Judy interrupted immediately. "A few days late is not always on time." Melissa nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am. I understand. Continue." Melissa glanced down at Emily before continuing. "I lost my job in February. The restaurant I worked at closed down suddenly. I told Mr. Porter right away. I explained I'd need maybe 2 extra weeks for rent." Judge Judy looked toward the landlord. Did she contact you?" "Yes," Daniel answered casually. But excuses don't pay mortgages." Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. "Nobody asked for your commentary yet." A few quiet laughs moved through the courtroom. Melissa continued carefully. "I started doing delivery work while looking for another job. I paid half the rent that month and told him I'd pay the rest within 10 days. "And did you?" "Yes, every dollar." Judge Judy flipped through the documents. "I see that payment here." Melissa nodded. After that, things got strange. Maintenance requests stopped getting answered. The heater broke for 4 days while it was snowing outside. Then one morning I found a notice taped to my door saying I had 72 hours to leave. And damshun shields and gartor in chowat. Judge Judy frowned instantly. 72 hours? "Yes." "Do you have the notice?" Melissa handed papers to the bailiff. Judge Judy read the document silently for several seconds. Then she looked at the landlord again. This is not a legal eviction notice." Daniel shrugged. "I was trying to encourage her to move out peacefully." Judge Judy stared at him. "Encourage?" She was behind before. "I didn't want future problems." Melissa spoke again, her voice tighter now. "I told him I wasn't leaving because I knew I had rights. Then 3 days later, my locks were changed." The courtroom became quieter. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. "While your belongings were still inside?" Melissa nodded slowly. "Yes. Me and my daughter came home from school pickup and couldn't get in. Edakistar and then the street." "And then?" Melissa swallowed hard before speaking again. "It was freezing outside. I called him over and over. No answer." Emily was crying. "We waited in the hallway almost 2 hours." The little girl looked down at the rabbit in her hands while her mother spoke. Finally, Melissa continued. "A maintenance worker came by and told me Mr. Porter ordered the locks changed that morning." Judge Judy turned sharply toward the landlord. "You changed the locks without a court order?" Daniel crossed his arms. "She owed money." Judge Judy's voice became colder. "That is not how eviction works in this country." Daniel shifted slightly but stayed quiet. Melissa opened another folder. "When we finally got inside the next day, some of our things were gone." Judge Judy looked up immediately. "What gone?" "Yes, ma'am. Emily's bedroom furniture, my laptop, boxes of clothes, my daughter's school supplies." The judge looked toward Daniel again. "Did you remove property from the apartment?" "No." Melissa immediately pulled out photographs. "I have pictures." The bailiff handed them to the judge. The photos showed a nearly empty bedroom, a mattress on the floor, open drawers, missing shelves, a child's room that looked half erased. Judge Judy studied them carefully. "When were these taken?" The day after we got back inside." Judge Judy looked at Daniel again. "Do you own maintenance staff?" "Yes." "Did any of them enter the apartment?" They have keys." That wasn't my question." Daniel paused. Possibly?" Judge Judy leaned back slowly. This is going very badly for you." Daniel cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this tenant caused constant problems. Noise complaints, late payments, Other tenants uncomfortable. Melissa looked shocked. That's not true. Judge Judy raised her hand instantly. One at a time, Daniel continued. She had strangers coming in and out. Melissa's face tightened immediately. Those were babysitters while I worked night shifts. Judge Judy looked at him sharply. Do you have police reports? Written complaints? Anything besides vague accusations? Daniel hesitated. No official reports. Then don't waste my time. The courtroom fell silent again. Judge Judy turned back to Melissa. What happened after the lockout? Melissa took another deep breath. We stayed in a motel for 6 days because I was scared he'd do it again. Judge Judy looked at the motel receipts. You paid almost $800. Yes. I had no choice. And your daughter missed school. Melissa nodded quietly. She started having panic attacks after this happened. Judge Judy glanced briefly toward the child again. Emily stayed close to her mother without speaking. Then the judge focused back on the landlord. You understand you cannot simply throw people out because you're irritated. Daniel spoke carefully now. I own 6 properties. I have responsibilities too. Judge Judy answered instantly. And tenants have rights too, especially tenants with children. Daniel finally looked slightly uncomfortable. Judge Judy flipped another page. What is this? Melissa spoke softly. That's from Child Protective Services. The courtroom shifted again. Judge Judy looked up sharply. Why was CPS involved? Melissa's eyes watered for the first time. Someone reported that my daughter was living in unsafe conditions. Judge Judy narrowed her eyes. When? 2 days after we were locked out. Judge Judy slowly turned her head toward the landlord. Did you make that call? Daniel blinked. No. Did anyone working for you? I wouldn't know. Judge Judy stared at him silently for several seconds. Then she looked back at the paperwork. The report says the caller claimed there was drug activity inside the apartment. Melissa shook her head immediately. That's a lie. Judge Judy looked at her. Were drugs found? No, ma'am. Judge Judy nodded once. Of course not. Melissa wiped her eyes carefully before continuing. My daughter heard the whole thing. CPS asking questions, looking through our motel room. She thought someone was taking her away from me. The little girl finally looked up for a moment, and the fear on her face made several people in the gallery visibly uncomfortable. Judge Judy's expression hardened. Then the bailiff approached the judge quietly and handed her another document that had just been delivered. Judge Judy looked down at it. Her eyes narrowed almost immediately. Well now, she said slowly. The courtroom became still. Judge Judy lifted the paper slightly. Mr. Porter, this says your maintenance worker submitted a sworn statement this morning. Daniel's face changed instantly. Judge Judy continued reading silently for several seconds before looking directly at him. He claims you personally instructed him to remove furniture from the apartment before Miss Grant returned home. Daniel's jaw tightened. Judge Judy placed the paper down carefully. And according to this statement, that's only the beginning. Daniel shifted in his chair for the first time since the case had started. Until that moment, he had looked comfortable, almost bored. But now the confidence around him had started cracking in small ways. His fingers tapped once against the table. His jaw tightened. Even the man sitting beside him leaned back slightly as if he suddenly wanted distance from the situation. Judge Judy held the sworn statement in her hand. You understand, she said calmly, that lying in this courtroom is not a smart life decision. Daniel forced a small smile. I'm not lying. Judge Judy looked down again. The maintenance worker says you told him Miss Grant was never coming back and that he could keep anything valuable left inside the apartment. Melissa stared across the room in disbelief. My daughter's furniture? She whispered. Judge Judy looked at Daniel. Did you say that? No. The judge lifted the paper slightly. Because your employee signed this under penalty of perjury. Daniel rubbed the side of his neck. He's angry because I fired him. Judge Judy answered immediately. Maybe, but he also attached photographs. The courtroom became silent again. The bailiff handed the photographs to Daniel first. His expression changed almost instantly. Then the pictures were passed to the judge. One showed a maintenance cart loaded with children's bedroom items. Another showed boxes stacked inside what looked like a storage garage. A third photo showed Melissa's laptop sitting on a workbench with a yellow sticker attached to it. Judge Judy looked up slowly. Interesting. Melissa covered her mouth with one hand. That's my computer. Judge Judy continued flipping through the photos. This timestamp is from the same evening the locks were changed. Daniel spoke quickly now. I never told him to steal anything. Judge Judy narrowed her eyes. But you admit the property was removed. Daniel hesitated too long. That's what I thought. Melissa suddenly leaned forward. My daughter's medicine was in there too. Judge Judy looked up immediately. What medicine? Melissa reached into her purse with shaky hands and pulled out a prescription paper. She has asthma. Judge Judy's face hardened again. You locked a child out of her home while her medication was inside? Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came out immediately. I didn't know about medicine. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair slowly. That sentence will probably comfort absolutely nobody. A few quiet chuckles spread through the courtroom again, but the tension stayed heavy. Melissa continued speaking softly. That night at the motel, Emily had an asthma attack. Judge Judy looked toward the child. Did she go to the hospital? Melissa nodded. I brought the records. The bailiff carried another folder to the bench. Judge Judy read silently for several moments. Then she looked toward Daniel again. This gets worse every 3 minutes. Daniel's lawyer finally spoke for the first time. Your Honor, my client acknowledges mistakes were made, but emotional storytelling doesn't change the financial issues involved. Miss Grant was behind on rent several times. Judge Judy turned instantly. How much? The lawyer looked through papers. At one point, approximately $1,100. Judge Judy looked at Melissa. And how much was eventually paid? All of it. Judge Judy nodded once. So there was no outstanding balance when the locks were changed. The lawyer stayed quiet. Judge Judy tapped her pen lightly against the desk. Then your argument is collapsing in real time. Melissa sat very still while Judge Judy reviewed more paperwork. Then the judge paused. What is this utility bill? Melissa looked over. He shut off the water 2 weeks before the lockout. Judge Judy looked up sharply. You shut off utilities too? Daniel looked frustrated now. The building had plumbing repairs. Melissa shook her head immediately. My neighbors still had water. Judge Judy turned back toward Daniel. You're digging yourself into a hole so deep you need a flashlight. The courtroom laughed louder this time. Daniel's lawyer attempted to recover. There's no proof my client intentionally targeted this tenant. Melissa suddenly reached into another folder. I have text messages. Judge Judy held out her hand. The messages were printed clearly. One read, if you can't afford to live there, maybe your kid should stay somewhere else. Another, single mothers are always drama. Judge Judy's face changed completely. The courtroom went dead quiet. She read the messages again slowly. Then she removed her glasses. Did you write these? Daniel stared at the papers. They were taken out of context. Judge Judy blinked once. In what possible context is that acceptable? Daniel's lawyer quietly lowered his eyes. Melissa looked down as she spoke. I tried so hard to keep things normal for my daughter. Her voice cracked slightly for the first time. She loved that apartment. We baked cookies there every Friday night. She had little glow stars on her ceiling. Melissa swallowed hard. After this happened, she stopped sleeping alone. Emily held tighter onto her stuffed rabbit. Judge Judy softened slightly as she looked toward the child. Then she turned back into steel when facing Daniel. You own property. That gives you responsibility. Not power to terrorize people. Daniel exhaled sharply. I never terrorized anyone. Judge Judy immediately lifted another page. The maintenance worker also claims you told him to make things difficult enough that she leaves on her own. Daniel looked furious now. He's lying. Judge Judy nodded slowly. Perhaps, but your own text messages support his statement. Daniel said nothing. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. Did you know Miss Grant filed for rental assistance the same week you changed the locks? Melissa looked surprised. I submitted proof. Judge Judy held up another document. She did. Approved for emergency assistance. Funds scheduled within 5 business days. Daniel's face lost color for the first time. Judge Judy noticed immediately. Oh, she said quietly. Now we're getting somewhere. Melissa frowned in confusion. Judge Judy looked at Daniel carefully. You knew the money was coming. No. Judge Judy lifted another sheet. Your signature is on the acknowledgement email. The courtroom reacted instantly with murmurs. Daniel's lawyer grabbed the document quickly and read it himself. His shoulders dropped slightly. Judge Judy spoke calmly now, but every word landed harder. So let me understand this correctly. A single mother falls temporarily behind after losing her job. She informs you immediately. She secures emergency assistance. Then before the funds arrive, you lock her out, remove her belongings, shut off utilities, and send degrading text messages about her child. Daniel looked cornered now. That's not what happened. Judge Judy leaned forward. Then help me understand what part I'm getting wrong. Daniel stayed silent. For several seconds, nobody in the courtroom spoke. Then Melissa quietly opened one final folder. There's one more thing. Judge Judy looked toward her. Melissa slid over several printed bank statements. Judge Judy reviewed them silently. Then her eyebrows rose. Well. Daniel immediately looked nervous again. Judge Judy held up the statements. These show multiple electronic rent payments from other tenants being redirected into a personal account separate from the property management company. Daniel's lawyer turned quickly toward him. What is this? Daniel spoke fast now. It's temporary bookkeeping. Judge Judy continued flipping pages. No, this is hidden bookkeeping. Melissa looked confused. I don't understand. Judge Judy answered without taking her eyes off the papers. I think your landlord may have had financial problems much larger than unpaid rent. Daniel's breathing visibly changed. Judge Judy looked up slowly. And according to these records, the week Miss Grant was locked out, she paused. Your properties were under investigation by the bank. For the first time since entering the courtroom, Daniel Porter stopped pretending he was calm. His lawyer leaned toward him immediately, whispering something urgently, but Daniel kept staring at the papers in Judge Judy's hands like he already knew the damage had been done. The courtroom had changed completely now. Earlier, it felt like a simple landlord dispute. Late rent, angry tenants, minor legal arguments. But suddenly, the entire room understood there was something much bigger underneath it. Judge Judy rested the bank statements on her desk carefully. Mr. Porter, she said, were your properties in pre-foreclosure? Weizhao. Daniel cleared his throat. That's private financial information. Judge Judy answered instantly. Not anymore. A few people laughed quietly. Daniel's lawyer stepped in quickly. Your Honor, my client's financial matters are irrelevant to whether this tenant violated her lease. Judge Judy looked at him sharply. They become relevant when the landlord starts illegally removing paying tenants while hiding money from lenders. The lawyer slowly sat back down. Melissa looked completely stunned. You were losing the building? She asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer her. Judge Judy continued flipping through the paperwork. These records show 3 missed mortgage payments on the property. Daniel rubbed his forehead. The market slowed down. Judge Judy ignored the excuse. And 2 weeks before the lockout, the bank scheduled an inspection. Still no answer. Judge Judy looked directly at him. You wanted tenants out before the bank got involved. No, Daniel said quickly. Judge Judy lifted another document. The maintenance worker says you plan to claim several apartments were vacant due to unreliable renters. Daniel's lawyer looked horrified now. You didn't tell me this. Daniel snapped quietly under his breath because it wasn't supposed to matter. Judge Judy heard it immediately. Oh, it matters now. Melissa sat frozen beside her daughter. You ruined our lives because you were trying to save yourself? Daniel finally looked at her directly for the first time. You have no idea what pressure I was under. Melissa stared at him in disbelief. My child slept in a motel bathroom because she was scared someone would come through the door. The courtroom went silent again. Emily lowered her head and held her rabbit closer. Judge Judy looked toward the little girl for a moment before returning her attention to Daniel. You know what your problem is? She asked calmly. Daniel said nothing. You think stress excuses cruelty? Daniel shook his head. That's not fair. Judge Judy pointed toward Melissa. No, what happened to her wasn't fair. The tension inside the courtroom felt heavier now. Even people sitting in the back rows leaned forward quietly. Judge Judy reviewed another page. And what exactly happened to Miss Grant's property after it was removed? Daniel spoke carefully. Most of it was placed in storage. Melissa interrupted immediately. That's a lie. Judge Judy raised her hand. Do you have proof? Melissa nodded and opened another folder. I tracked down the maintenance worker myself after this happened. Judge Judy looked interested immediately. No? He told me where some of the furniture went. The bailiff carried over several printed screenshots. Judge Judy reviewed them silently. Then she looked up slowly. You sold the child's bedroom set online? Daniel's face tightened. It was abandoned property. Judge Judy almost laughed. Abandoned? You locked them out. Daniel rubbed both hands together now, frustration leaking through every movement. I needed money. Melissa looked like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Judge Judy continued reading. The buyer paid $400 cash. Daniel muttered quietly, it wasn't worth much. Melissa suddenly lost composure for the first time. That bed belonged to my mother. The entire courtroom jumped slightly at the emotion in her voice. My mom bought that before she died, Melissa continued, tears finally falling now. Emily slept in it every night since she was born. Even Daniel's lawyer looked uncomfortable now. Judge Judy let the silence sit for a moment. Then she asked quietly, "Did you know that?" Daniel avoided eye contact. "No." Judge Judy nodded slowly. That's the problem with treating people like paperwork. You stop seeing them as human beings." Melissa wiped her face while Emily wrapped one arm around her mother. Judge Judy looked back toward Daniel again. "And according to these messages, when Miss Grant asked about getting her belongings back, you told her, and I quote," she adjusted her glasses, "maybe this will teach you not to depend on sympathy." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Judge Judy folded the papers together carefully. "You weren't just trying to remove a tenant, you wanted to punish her." Daniel spoke louder now, defensive and frustrated. You don't understand what tenants do to landlords. They damage units. They stop paying. They manipulate the system." Judge Judy cut him off sharply. "She paid." Daniel stopped talking. "She communicated." Silence. "She secured assistance." Silence again. "And instead of following the law, you decided humiliation would move faster." Daniel's face reddened. Judge Judy leaned slightly forward. "You know what bothers me most about this case?" Nobody answered. "It's the child." Emily looked up quietly. Judge Judy's voice softened slightly. "Children remember fear differently than adults do." Melissa looked down at her daughter. Judge Judy continued, "Adults recover financially, emotionally too sometimes. But children remember sounds, hallways, cold weather, their mother crying when she thinks nobody notices." The courtroom stayed completely silent. Daniel shifted uncomfortably again. Judge Judy looked directly at him. "You created instability for a little girl because your bank account was collapsing," Daniel finally snapped. The key. "I was drowning." His voice echoed through the courtroom. "I had 6 buildings, loans everywhere, tenants behind on payments, contractors threatening lawsuits." Judge Judy slammed her pen down. "So you chose the weakest person in the building to take it out on." Daniel stopped talking instantly. Judge Judy stared at him coldly. "A single mother with a child is who you decided to pressure." Daniel looked away. Judge Judy turned back toward Melissa. "When did you finally leave the apartment permanently?" Melissa sniffed quietly before answering. "About 3 weeks later." "Where did you go?" "We moved into my cousin's basement." Judge Judy nodded slowly. "How many people?" 7 total." Judge Judy looked genuinely disturbed. "And your daughter?" Melissa forced a weak smile. "She slept on an air mattress." Emily looked down at the floor again. Judge Judy reviewed more receipts silently. Then she paused at one document. "What's this charge?" Melissa answered quietly. That was for replacing my daughter's inhaler." Judge Judy's eyes narrowed slightly. $180? "Yes." Judge Judy looked at Daniel. "You cost this woman more money than she allegedly owed you." Daniel stayed silent. Then the courtroom doors suddenly opened. Everyone turned. A tall older man in a dark coat entered holding a folder under his arm. He looked nervous, but determined. The bailiff approached him immediately. After a short conversation, the bailiff walked to the judge and handed over another document. Judge Judy scanned the first page. Then she looked up. "And who exactly are you?" The man cleared his throat. "My name is Walter Hayes." Judge Judy waited. "I'm the former property manager for Mr. Porter." Daniel's entire face changed instantly. Walter continued carefully. "And I came because there's something this courtroom still doesn't know." Walter Hayes stood near the courtroom entrance holding the folder tightly against his chest. He looked like a man who had spent several days arguing with himself before finally deciding to walk into that room. Daniel Porter looked furious the second he saw him. "You have got to be kidding me," Daniel muttered. Judge Judy ignored him. "Come forward," she said to Walter. Walter stepped carefully toward the witness stand. His hands shook slightly as he was sworn in. Judge Judy watched him closely. "You said you were the former property manager." "Yes, ma'am." "How long did you work for Mr. Porter?" "About 6 years." Judge Judy nodded once. "And why are you here today?" Walter glanced toward Melissa and her daughter before answering. "Because what happened to them wasn't an accident." The courtroom became completely still. Daniel immediately leaned toward his lawyer. They whispered urgently while Walter continued. Judge Judy folded her hands together. "Explain." Walter took a breath. Mr. Porter started having serious financial trouble almost a year ago. At first, he tried refinancing properties. Then he started moving money around between accounts. Judge Judy lifted the bank records slightly. These accounts?" Yes." Walter nodded. "He stopped fixing apartments. stopped paying vendors. He even delayed plumbing repairs because he couldn't afford contractors anymore. Daniel interrupted angrily. You don't know what you're talking about. Walter looked directly at him. I know because I handled the invoices. Judge Judy raised one finger toward Daniel without even looking at him. Quiet? Daniel leaned back again, visibly boiling with anger. Walter continued carefully. Quiet. When tenants fell behind on rent, even temporarily, Mr. Porter panicked. He thought vacancies would help him negotiate with the bank. Endure, sir, Dr. Sar. Melissa frowned in confusion. That makes no sense. Walter nodded sadly. It didn't. But he thought if he removed struggling tenants, he could raise rent prices and attract higher-income renters before the inspections happened. Judge Judy's face hardened, so Miss Grant became disposable. Walter lowered his eyes. Yes? Melissa looked stunned again, like every answer somehow made the situation worse instead of clearer. Judge Judy spoke calmly now. Did you witness illegal lock changes? Walter nodded immediately. Several times? The courtroom reacted again. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. Several? Walter swallowed. Yes, ma'am. Daniel's lawyer closed his eyes briefly. Walter continued. Most tenants were too scared or too broke to fight back. Melissa looked horrified. Judge Judy narrowed her eyes. And you're only coming forward now because? Walter looked ashamed. Because of the little girl. The room became silent again. Walter glanced toward Emily. The night they got locked out, I was there. Melissa looked at him immediately. You saw us? Walter nodded slowly. I saw her sitting in that hallway wrapped in a blanket. Emily held tighter onto her stuffed rabbit. Walter's voice grew quieter. My granddaughter has asthma too. Daniel scoffed under his breath. Judge Judy turned sharply. You are in absolutely no position to scoff at anything. Daniel looked away again. Walter opened the folder he brought with him. I also brought copies of internal emails. Daniel's lawyer immediately sat upright. What emails? Walter handed papers to the bailiff. Judge Judy reviewed the first page silently. Then she looked up very slowly. Oh my. Daniel's entire posture stiffened. Judge Judy read aloud. Push out Unit 4B before inspection. Late payers make the property look unstable. Melissa covered her mouth. Judge Judy flipped another page. And this one says, she paused briefly. Single mom probably won't fight back legally. The courtroom erupted with murmurs. Daniel finally snapped. Doc, that's what? I was frustrated. Judge Judy slammed her palm lightly against the desk. You were predatory. Silence. Judge Judy stared directly at him. You targeted somebody you thought had less power than you. Daniel's breathing became heavier now. You don't understand business pressure. Judge Judy answered immediately. I understand law. That's enough. Walter continued carefully. There's more. Judge Judy nodded for him to continue. The CPS report. Melissa froze instantly. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed again. Walter looked directly at Daniel before speaking. He made that call. The entire courtroom exploded into shocked whispers. Melissa looked like all the air had been knocked out of her chest. Judge Judy slowly turned toward Daniel. Did you report this woman to Child Protective Services? Daniel spoke quickly now. I was concerned about the child. Judge Judy almost laughed from disbelief. You locked her outside in winter. Daniel tried again. I thought the environment was unstable. Judge Judy cut him off sharply. You created the unstable environment. Walter spoke again. I heard him make the call from the office. Daniel pointed angrily. You're lying because you got fired. Walter shook his head slowly. No, I got fired because I refused to help remove more tenants. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair. This is uglier than I originally thought. Melissa looked down at Emily, who had tears running quietly down her face now. Judge Judy noticed immediately. She softened her tone slightly. Sweetheart, she said gently to Emily, you did nothing wrong. The little girl nodded once without speaking. Melissa wiped tears from her own face. She thought they were going to take her away from me. Judge Judy looked back at Daniel. And you used state services to frighten a struggling mother. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face now. The arrogance he arrived with was completely gone. His lawyer finally spoke quietly. Your Honor, my client is willing to discuss settlement. Judge Judy answered immediately. We're far beyond hallway settlement conversations. The courtroom stayed silent. Judge Judy reviewed all the documents one final time. Emails, bank records, hospital bills, motel receipts, text messages, photographs. Then she folded her hands together. I've been doing this a long time, she said calmly. Nobody moved. And one thing I've learned is that people show you exactly who they are when they believe someone beneath them cannot fight back. Daniel stared at the desk. Judge Judy continued, Miss Grant lost a job. That happens. People struggle. Good people struggle every day. Melissa quietly cried beside her daughter. But instead of patience or legal procedure, Mr. Porter chose intimidation. He chose humiliation. He weaponized housing against a mother and child. Daniel shook his head weakly. I never meant for it to go this far, Judge Judy answered instantly. It went exactly as far as your choices took it. Silence filled the courtroom again. Then Judge Judy straightened the papers in front of her. Here is my ruling. Nobody even breathed. For illegal eviction, destruction of property, emotional distress, temporary housing expenses, medical costs, and punitive damages, she paused. I am awarding Melissa Grant $25,000. The courtroom burst into shocked reactions. Melissa covered her mouth completely, crying harder now. Emily looked confused but hugged her mother tightly. Judge Judy continued before anyone could speak. And frankly, if this court allowed higher damages, I would consider them. Daniel looked completely defeated. Judge Judy pointed toward him. You should also understand something very clearly. What happened here today does not end when this courtroom closes. Daniel slowly looked up. Judge Judy tapped the bank records. These documents suggest potential financial fraud and housing violations. I strongly suspect several agencies may become interested in you very soon. Daniel's lawyer looked physically sick. Judge Judy turned back toward Melissa. You fought back properly, legally, calmly. That matters. Melissa nodded through tears. Thank you. Judge Judy looked toward Emily one final time. And, sweetheart, Emily looked up quietly. I hope the next place you live has brighter stars on the ceiling. For the first time all day, the little girl smiled. A tiny smile, but real. Judge Judy nodded once toward the bailiff. We're done here. The gavel came down sharply. And Daniel Porter sat motionless at the defense table while the single mother he tried to break walked out of the courtroom holding her daughter's hand.